Good evening and welcome. I'm Sarah Drake Brown, Associate Director of the National Council for History Education. NCHE is pleased to bring the webinar, Putting History in Its Place, using GIS to enhance history instruction to you this evening. The National Council for History Education provides professional and intellectual leadership to foster an engaged community committed to the teaching, learning, and appreciation of diverse histories. We have a variety of professional activities for anyone interested in history and in history teaching. Our webinars, colloquia, resources, and conversations with noted historians, learning specialists, and master teachers are here for you. If you haven't done so already, we encourage you to become a member of NCHE by visiting us online at www.ncheteach.org and clicking on Join. To find out more about NCHE's mission and programming, check out our website and follow us on Twitter @HistoryEd or at our Facebook and Instagram pages. If you have questions or comments, please contact me at Sarah with an H at nche.net. And it doesn't want to go, so we'll do it this way.
Okay.
NCHE proudly announces upcoming professional learning. Join us for the Rural Experience in America, Community Civics Through Historical Inquiry. This professional learning, funded by the Library of Congress, begins December 1st. Please see our website and contact Regina Holland for details. And register now for colloquia presented as part of our Library of Congress funded grant, Technology's Impact in American History. See our website for more information and to register. Information will be available on November 15th for our Landmarks of American History and Culture program, The Space Race on the Space Coast. Please see our website next week for information on how to apply for this program funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. And don't forget our conference. We will convene virtually March 17th through 20th, 2022, and our theme is Historical Communities of Promise and Practice, with 5 keynotes, connection sessions, breakout sessions, posters, and a variety of sponsors. There's something for all history enthusiasts at NCHE's annual conference. Thanks for taking a moment to catch up on what's happening at the National Council for History Education. Now, let's get going with this evening's event. Chris Bunin teaches social studies and geospatial technologies at Albemarle High School in Charlottesville, Virginia. He is also assistant professor of geography at Piedmont, Virginia Community College and the iSTEM GIS chairperson for the Virginia Geographic Alliance. During the past decade, he has collaborated on a variety of projects focused on using geospatial technologies and geoliteracy to enhance historical research and instruction. He is co-author of Jamestown to Appomattox, Mapping U.S. History with GIS, and GIS for Teachers, a guide to authentic K-12 integration and application. In 2016, NCSS recognized Chris as the Secondary Social Studies Teacher of the Year, and in 2017, NCGE awarded him the Brun Creativity Award for the outstanding teaching of geography. This evening, it is my pleasure to introduce Chris Bunin, bringing us Putting History in Its Place, using GIS to enhance history instruction. Chris, I'll stop sharing my screen and you can then please share yours and we should be ready to go.
All right, thank you for that kind introduction, Sarah, and thank you for joining us this evening. I know it's hump day, and if you're in the classroom, it's a second unprecedented year in the classroom. So thank you for taking the time to learn how these technologies may make your life in the classroom a bit easier and possibly more engaging for your students, depending on how your classroom is. But I do hope that you leave today with things that you can begin using tomorrow. So as Sarah shared, give me just a second to get this going. Yeah, I'm just so you know, as Sarah shared, I'm joining you from just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, in Afton. I teach high school social studies and career technical education at Albemarle High School, which is just a stone's throw outside of Charlottesville. I teach world history, AP human geography, and geospatial tech. As the coffee mugs my students have given me through the years, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is my game. So I hope tonight we're going to move not too fast, but we're going to move kind of rapidly, because I do want you to understand what are these technologies, while at the same time getting a chance to dabble with some of the ready-made materials that are out there for you. So first off, I'm joining. I show this because one of the cool things, if you dive into this technology, is you get to fly drones. And so this is a picture that my students took of our school campus right on the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains there. And I live in Albemarle County, that was created in 1744, named after, hard to believe, a royal member in Britain. But tonight's itinerary is, I want to share with you quickly just what is GIS. Well, we use the word geospatial technologies. Today, we're going to be focusing primarily on the abbreviation GIS as the tool that you can use immediately. We'll discuss how GIS works, best ways to begin teaching with GIS. We'll share with you a series of ready-made materials that were created and entitled Geo Inquiries. Then I'll share some classroom examples of how my students are going beyond using Geo Inquiries in the classroom. And then I'll open it up for questions and next steps for you. In the chat box, you should see a website, a Google site, just with a landing page of a number of links I'm going to share with you. Some of the links that are listed in there, I always feel, I always like to have backup material. So there will be some links we won't click on. However, you are more than welcome to investigate those at another time. This website will stay up after this webinar. So Sarah, I don't know if you're able to do it, but if you want to go ahead and copy and paste it one more time for anybody who's joined since we posted it the first time, and that way it keeps it updated. First off, I'm a historian and a geographer by trade. My undergraduate degree was in history. I decided I want to be a social studies teacher, and they make you take some geography classes. I'm like, wow, this geography is really cool. Like, the interplay between geography and history is so real and authentic. And man, I just love this. And so I ended up sticking around while I was working on my teaching certificate and worked on a master's degree in geography. So I'm a historical geographer. And about now it's about 12 years ago, I started exploring ways to use geospatial technologies in the history classroom as part of a Teaching American History grant. And one of our first keynote speakers is a professor from, Sarah can probably help me on this, Indiana University, Purdue University, and Indianapolis. They don't like it when I say ooey pooey. They're like, that's not what you say. Anyway, there's a professor there at the Polis Center named David Bodenhammer who said, every event has both a temporal and spatial tag. But in history, we often focus on the chronology, when something happened. And in the history classrooms, we really emphasize that. We know when something happened. However, the degree of certainty when it comes to where it happened and why it happened there, the knowledge is less precise. And so a few years ago, I had the honor to travel to Vietnam, to northern Vietnam, to Dien Bien Phu, the fall of French Indochina. And we were there with the National Humanities Center to create geospatially enabled tools to help out people that travel to this area. And we were standing at this place, which is one of the trenches that were built there, and I had my GPS unit out, and it happened to post an arrow to, here's where you're standing. My students knew I was over there in Vietnam, and I showed these pictures to them, and I want you to know the picture on the right, it didn't faze them. They had seen this picture when we were teaching about World War I. It's a French trench. The picture on the left led to so many questions. Mr. Bunin, why were you so far north? Why did French Indochina fall so far north? Why did the battle happen there? It led to so many questions. And then after we left this site, the next day, we were standing at the location where the last French command center was in French Indochina. And when you visit there, it's like visiting a American Revolution site. It's the birth of independence for Vietnam. And we get there, and all of a sudden, we see a bunch of ninth graders with their iPhones, their iPads, interviewing us because we were clearly outsiders or not, visiting the center. And they're there asking us questions, using their digital technologies and using their 4G or 5, it was 4G network at the time. And next thing you know, they're like, can we take a picture of you? I'm like, sure. And I'm Snapchatted. They are Snapchatting me out. The reason why I like to start off these sessions with this is one thing nice about bringing in geospatial technologies is you're connecting with our students as digital natives, and these technologies are ubiquitous in our lives today. So the term GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. Geographic, it's the map. Information, it's a table, it's a spreadsheet. It can be Excel, it can be Google Sheets, but the system is how the spreadsheet and what you see on the map interact together. So that's what makes it a system of technology, an interactive system. The other nice thing about GIS maps is it's not what you see is what you get. It's not the textbook where if the history has changed, you have to put a sticker over it or tell the kids, no, this map's a little old, let me correct it and scribble on it. No, there are layers of information that you can turn on or off. It's an awesome tool for differentiation. If a student is needing something to become more complicated and complex, you can do that. If a student needs you to, as we like to say, improve the signal and reduce the noise, turn some layers off. You can remove some information if necessary. It's a really, really, really interactive, dynamic tool like that. It's ubiquitous in our lives, and then if you need directions, we go to a GIS map to get directions from point A to point B. In the GIS world, we call this network analysis. In our world, we call it directions, okay? How interactive is it? Maybe you've seen this app. This is the Waze app. People are putting geographic information on the map on the fly. And they can tell us where the police are, where there's a stick in the road, where the traffic is slowed down. It can then reroute us with network analysis to other directions. And it's a cool tool. It's the same thing. This was MapQuest, which was so cool in 1999 and 2000. And this is what we're using today. Just last week in Virginia, we had an election. People were following the results, following the New York Times or other ones using geographic information systems. This is just a simple map letting us know how red or how blue an area is. And then if you want to know information about a location, click on the county. And I deliberately chose Nelson County because that's where my wife and my family and I live. Communities are using it to help solve problems. This is an app that Raleigh, North Carolina used to map out the density of trash on the streets. So now you have more informed, efficient decisions as to where do you send the street sweepers. And then humanists and historians are using it. The technology is not just for the sciences and the businesses. Digital history and digital humanities are gravitating to this technology as well. And so one of my favorite professors who've used this is a guy by the name of Dr. Joshua Katz, who maybe you've seen his poll or his quiz that he had out. It was very popular in the New York Times for a while. How do you guys speak? And he basically has people fill out a survey by zip code. And then he maps out how they speak. And then he created a really nice thematic map to show you there are 4 different ways people refer to in the United States a miniature lobster that one finds in the lakes or streams. And so with the folks who are here, I'll ask if anybody would be willing to share, how do you pronounce or call, what do you call this miniature lobster you find in lakes and streams? I'm going to put Sarah on the spot. Sarah, what do you call a miniature lobster you find in a lake or a stream?
I call it a crawfish.
A crawfish. Well, a crawfish means that you live in an area that's pink or red. Crayfish would be in the blue area. A crawdad is a green area. And I don't know what this is in the more yellow areas. They tend to be drier areas. Sarah, back to you.
I'm relieved. It lined up from where I'm from, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, what's your generic term for a sweetened carbonated beverage?
Pop.
Pop. And that looks like that lines up for you too. Where are you joining us from, Sarah?
The Chicago area.
Chicago area. So yeah, you've got the blue for pop, and that's right. Red is soda, green is Coke, yellow is soft drink. You can Google Joshua Katz maps, and you can find 20 to 30 of these, and they're great to discuss with your students regional differences and dialects. But he used GIS to visualize what his research was or is. I shared this with a teacher last year when we were doing Zoom teaching. She said, yeah, I am from New York, and I've got people from Western New York and Eastern New York, and it's different on both sides of the state. But this is actually the map that gets more students to sign up for my class than anything else. I want to map LeBron James's shots. It's the same technique as mapping trash. Shots on a map, trash on the ground, are dots on a map. And so this guy who, Kurt Goldsberry, he's an alumnus of the Penn State University. I need to correct myself. And he was mapping food deserts and working with flood data for the EPA, but his passion was basketball. So he just started mapping basketball shots, and he became a consultant. ESPN hired him. He is now an NBA executive who does NBA analytics using geospatial technologies. My GIS class just finished up their first set of independent projects they do one every 9 weeks, and half the students were doing some type of sports analytics. It's just of interest to them, but the techniques are the same that you would use for environmental science, basketball, historical GIS. You're using the same skills. And to show you that example, a few years ago, a student of mine wanted to replicate the Raleigh, North Carolina project, and she found that our school was really clean. So I was like, well, what could you do to jazz up? She goes, I would love to track the hall monitor or our hall monitor who moves around. I was like, okay. So she set up a Twitter feed, and people started to send in reports of where they saw the hall monitor and where you shouldn't go if you're going out of class. And so she created a report and map, say, hey, during this time of the day, here's where they nicknamed him Clive is hanging out. And we let Clive know we're mapping him and tracking him. And it turned out that we wanted to get a picture with him. And she said, well, it's around noon. He's probably in the office. And sure enough, we go to the office and he's not there, but as we leave, he shows up. So it's pretty scientific. I do want you to note, though, on the right, she says this map is theoretical and it does not encourage skipping classes. This is this. That's all it is. And so perhaps as we go through this, think about different topics you teach where seeing dots on a map and being able to interact with them would elevate your students' understanding of where things happen, why they happen there, and why do we care about them, whether it's historical or contemporary. So to get started today, I want to have you interact with a map. We'll go to the website that I posted with the resources in a moment, but it deals with the Titanic. And the Titanic had a manifest and a list of all the passengers on it. And as long as you have locations, you can map it. So if you would, please give me just a moment to head here. You're going to see tonight's session. We're moving through some things a little bit on the up at the beginning here. If we had some time, I'd have you interact with a map to introduce yourselves. You're welcome to go check it out. It's a map that you can interact with on the fly and add locations where you believe history influenced geography, geography influenced history, or just a place that's significant to you. The next two things are videos that if you want to show it to your colleagues or to your students to explain what GIS is, you can do that. But as I shared, the I in GIS stands for information. So if you'll go to the fourth bullet point and open up the Titanic table. This is 47 pages of morbid geo-goodiness, if you will. It's 47 pages of the passengers that were on the Titanic. And again, if you were in a traditional workshop with me, I'd ask you to spend a lot of time looking at patterns. But instead, I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box. If we look at the columns, in order for something to be a geographic, you have to have a location. Are there any column titles here that says, we have locations we can map? And I'll pause for a moment. If you would reply in the chat box, if there are any columns that stand out to you that we have locations, we can map this. Well, we have hometown, we have their destination, and we have where they're boarded. In addition, we have rows that are coded as color-coded in blue or clear. Clear rows represent that they did not survive. Blue rows represented that they did survive, and you can tell by over here on the far right, the lifeboat number or the body number, or there's not a body number. In addition, as we work right now, we start out in first class, and then we can work our way down and we'll move into second class and third class. The team at the software company, Esri, decided that, you know, we can map this and create a pretty dynamic map. And that's the fifth link here, the fate of the Titanic. If you go ahead and click on this link, it brings up the information mapped. It's ready to go. In addition, what's dynamic about the GIS map is that rather than having to slog through 47 pages of data, you can filter the data by saying, show me just the geographic distribution of first class. Show me the geographic distribution of second class. Now show me third class. What my students notice when we look at this map is they notice a few things. They say, one, Mr. Bunin, in the United States, there are very few people from the southern states that were on the Titanic. There's a person from Jacksonville, Father Robert Bateman, and if I click on his name, I see the exact same information that we were seeing in the table. We also see that they highlight the locations we were just talking about, their hometown, their intended destination. And they noticed also, my students do, that in the United States, most people, particularly in the larger states in first class, their hometown and their destination are the same place. In Europe, that's different, particularly in third class. When you go to third class and you look at the destination, you start to see, actually in the United States, it's the same, but when you look over here, they see that there's a hometown location, and then they're migrating to the United States to a location. What else is nice about GIS maps is the scalability. You can look at it at a global scale, or you can zoom down to a local scale. And so I had a student a few years ago who's from Ireland. Her family's from Ireland. And she goes, did you ever notice what happens in Ireland? In first class, there's one passenger from Ireland in first class, a few more in second class, and then third class, we see a lot more people migrating to the United States. You might hear my dog in the background, by the way, while I'm chatting with you. So this map right here, I use this map in AP Human, I use it in world history, I use it in US history. I use it right after the Industrial Revolution. I teach that, and I will ask students to look at this map and ask them, let me zoom back out here. After we've learned more about the Industrial Revolution, I'm like, do you notice any connections just through this map? They go, well, yeah, one, there are classes on the ship. There were classes in society. Secondly, first class seems to connect industrial centers with industrial centers, capitalists with capitalists. A huge migration of workers to head to the different areas that were part of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. So this is a really ready-made map. You can use it, come up with your own questions, go for it, use it. The next map I'd like to show you is the power of data map. And this goes to the first person who considered to use GIS. His name was John Snow. There was a cholera outbreak in London, and he went door to door and he was mapping out the cholera outbreak. So yeah.
On my screen anyway, I'm not seeing that map yet.
Oh, then let me do a stop share reshare. Okay. That sometimes needs to trip that back up. So see it now?
Yes.
All right, cool. So in this activity, you'll see I use this for one of the first few days of school to just help my students think about looking at patterns and trying to think of describing things that they see geographically. In this map, first of all, it happened is the cholera outbreak happened in Soho, which I did before this project. I didn't know that it meant south of Houston Street, not Houston Street as it looks, but south of Houston Street. And there's a Soho in New York. But John Snow went and he mapped out cholera cases by address. And each one of these dots, they have geographic information on it. By the way, if you see the FID, I have so many people say, what is the FID? It stands for feature ID. He wasn't capturing that, but the software has to generate that to show a map. So it's basically the 13th row of data in the table. He was, though, mapping out the number of cases. And so if we think about how this map was showing that, we can just look at this map and say there were a lot of people from New York on the Titanic based on a graduated symbol. We can do the same thing with this map. And so as you learn to use this technology, and when I show you in a moment the geo inquiries, it'll have you sometimes change the style of what you're seeing on the map. So you can hover over a layer and you can say, I want to change the style. And notice I'm going through this a little slower just so you can see it. To have the map become interactive, if you load the map initially, I don't think the legend shows up, so I'll show you this. So notice when it comes in this way, you come in and there's no legend. It's already tripped up at a legend. By the way, this map will always come up with an error. Just ignore it. But you'll notice you have the legend, then you have a link for content. When you click on content, those are the layers of the map. So again, what you see is not always what you get. You can reveal things or remove things as needed. And so again, we start out in Soho, then we check the box for cholera cases. And when you hover over a layer, tools become available to you. So one tool is the first to show you behind the cholera cases. There's our table of data. There's the I in GIS. Number of cases and address. And then the feature ID, notice it corresponds with what row it is in the table. So one way to think about GIS too is any row on the table, it's a feature on the map. So if we had countries around the world, we'd see 200 plus rows. Each row represents information about a country. If we were looking at Civil War battles, each row would represent one Civil War battle and have information there, or American Revolutionary War or World War II. To get rid of the table, just click on the right X and it removes on the right-hand side. But so under change style, click on change style, and we can say, you know what, right now we're showing location only. And the software is really nice. It gives you steps on the to say step 1, do this, step 2, do this. So step 1 is what column of information or field of data do you want to map? So we could say, I want you to map number of cases. When we do that, immediately our map changes and gives us an entirely different story on the ground. We can look at the map and go, wow, there are more cases happening right smack dab in the middle of this map. We could also, though, go down a little further, and there's an option for a heat map. This is where the kids like it because now we go all CSI. They're like, "Ooh, we see the hot spots." And interestingly, the students always notice, and the one that really tipped Jon Snow off was the hot spot over here. He went to interview people, and he interviewed a woman who lived in this neighborhood who said, "I noticed you have a number of cholera cases here. Can you tell me about your behavior, your daily circulation, your daily movement?" She said, "Well, every day we head over to Broad Street and we get water there." He goes, He goes, "We need some more data." So then he mapped out, where are the public water pumps? And he looked and he said, "Oh, there is a water pump right here on Broadwick Street." And he went and told the people there, "Take the handle off the well pump. Let's see what happens." They took the well handle off the pump, and he becomes known as the father of epidemiology because he's the first person to realize that cholera is a waterborne illness. And he did it all with paper maps and investigative reporting. But it's geographic information, and his mom was a system. One of my advisors in grad school likes to say, "We're all geographic information systems. We just don't know it." So these are just two introductory activities. I use both of these in the first week of school when I'm just trying to create critical thinking activities and things, and I'm trying to bring in some history, and just to have students dabble with why there, where, why there, why care, and how does geography and history, how does the interplay really inform us of what has happened and what is going on. So give me just a minute to go back to my PowerPoint. So again, just to review, GIS, tables, maps. If you understand that, you can create your own data sets. What drives a lot of this is the geographic inquiry process. And by the way, it can be the historical inquiry process. It can be the scientific inquiry process. We all do the same thing. We ask questions. We gather sources or information. We explore it. We analyze it, and then we act on it in some way. It's just the inquiry process. If you ever travel to London, you can visit a commemorative well pump to show just how significant this was in London's history. But right now, I'll just ask, like, when you think about your own teaching of history, when does location, distance and direction, neighborhood, region, territory, or scale matter in your teaching? And I'll pause for just a moment. And if you would like to put anything in the chat box to share what's one topic you teach where geography matters.
As people are considering this, Chris, when you ask students these types of questions, what are the responses that they usually give when you ask them why location matters?
That we often look at local things. So location matters with where you attend school. Location matters with regards to people that have access to food, particularly food deserts or not. Location matters for being connected to the internet. If you're in a more, so a lot of times I'm even just thinking of today, we're talking about Louis the 14th and talking about characteristics of an absolute ruler and just why he built Versailles and what it represented. And then we're like, well, can you think of any way in which people show off? And by seeing that, you believe there's power. So often we start with the very local and relevant, or where do you see things? For instance, University of Virginia is right nearby, and we discuss why would the National Ground Intelligence Center and other research parks build their offices near UVA. And so I think a lot of times for students to think about this when they don't have the content knowledge for history, to start with their own lives. You can even ask within their own homes, Why do you have your room set up the way that you do? Where, actually my favorite, where, why there, why care, the grocery store.
Mhm.
Where do grocery stores typically place the bread and the milk?
Well, and I think too, yeah,
All right.
this idea of getting students to just think about asking those questions themselves and looking around is
Yeah.
so important. And it can sometimes, I think if we aren't careful, throw us as teachers, because too often, likely to your bigger point here, we just start teaching in history, maybe the content and the ways of thinking in history as a discipline that are important, without pausing to think, hey, what is this bigger context that I have to help my students ask questions about? So thanks
Right.
for
Yeah.
reminding us of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So to let you know, some common responses that teachers will share about where location matters is um, any battle. Any battle typically has a location. There's a phrase that the director or the superintendent of the Meuse-Argonne cemetery along the Western Front, his quote is, "Geography is war." In order to understand a war, you have to understand the geography. And in fact, as we get close to Veterans Day, that's what made me think about the Meuse-Argonne offensive. It ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and that will be tomorrow. Distance and direction, Cuban Missile Crisis. Neighborhood, region, territory, pick a social conflict. Scale, local, regional, national, global, COVID. As one example, when we think about the power of scale, elections scale, impact of battles, impact of the progressive era. Progressive era looks very different from northern cities to what it looks like in the Midwest and in the Western territories and in the South, and that can shift things. So think about that. So when we first started using GIS in the classroom, for whatever reason, using the word information systems scared people. If we said, do these themes matter in your classroom? They're like, oh, give me some of that. I really want to see how to use this in the classroom. Give me just a second to trigger this. So when you use this technology, definitely think about what's your purpose. We encourage you to start with teaching with GIS, not teaching GIS, because it can become overwhelming. This is a colleague of mine using a geo inquiry to teach his students about a concept. This student, the map on the bottom right, is a student of mine helping map out affordable housing in the Charlottesville area for a local nonprofit. So that's using GIS skills. The top one is use ready-made things to help elevate instruction. A great, really simple tool. This is one of the very first activities we created. Was just, and the essential question was, why New Orleans? And so I'd like for you to head back to the website, and you will see there's a why New Orleans map, and you'll see just below it, there are directions of how to create your own why New Orleans map if you would like. So if you want to use the ready-made map, that's great. That's another nice thing about GIS maps. Once you make it, you have it. You can put it in your learning management system, whether it's Canvas, Schoology, Blackboard, and you can say, here, kids, open up this map and let you explore it. Then I want to teach you about the event. So with this one, and another saying we like to use is like, you can have this great technology, but be careful. You want to make sure you are using a dart gun to bring down an elephant, but you don't need a bazooka to kill an ant. So there are times where a paper map and the maps that you're currently using are a-okay and great to use. There's no need to make them GIS maps. In other cases, it's really nice when you can use a GIS tool to really cover a lot of material quickly. So in this case, the question for the students is, why New Orleans? This is a map we made, and then we just published it as a simple viewer called the basic viewer. When you open it up, you've got an area with the legend. When you click on that, the legend should pop up, but it didn't. These are the layers. Where'd you go, layers? Why are you not? It worked earlier today. Let's see. Let's try a refresh. Sometimes GIS will do this too, but
Well, if it helps, it's doing it for me when I
oh, it
do
is
it
using
on
it.
my own
Okay,
link.
cool. So let me just try this in another browser. That might help too. So sometimes I will tell you, ArcGIS does not like Internet Explorer. It does like Mozilla Firefox or Chrome. So let's just see, maybe in a new browser it will pop up for me. So let's try this again. Yeah, okay. So when you turn on the layers, the simple question for the kids is why New Orleans? And typically a typical 6th grade, 9th grade, 12th grade response is, well, it's New Orleans and it's where the Mississippi River is. You're like, okay, so you could turn on the layer and say, you're right, it's where the Mississippi River flows. Then you could say, well, what about the river system? You're like, well, what's the system? And you're like, well, the Mississippi River system is all the tributaries that flow in to the Mississippi River. Like, okay, so really New Orleans controls not just the Mississippi River, but the system. So then you can say, well, let's look at what the system looks like. And the kids go, oh, New Orleans controlled all of that water. And these, by the way, are just the navigable tributaries. This isn't including every little stream and so forth. And you can say, well, how many US states intersect a Mississippi River system state? 28. 28 states in the Union have land here. So you could say, so why would Thomas Jefferson send individuals to France, say, we would like to negotiate New Orleans and Western Florida as a purchase? And they'd say, well, because it controls the river, the system, the land, the transportation. So I actually, when I do this activity, they do a pre-assessment. Tell me why New Orleans based on the Mississippi River. It's pretty limited. They look at this and they go, because it will control, and they list all the things that they can now see. And then finally you say, well, let's look at the Mississippi or the Louisiana Purchase. And I've had so many students go, oh, so that's why it's shaped the way that it is. Like they've never understood when they see it on a map, it shows up in all the paper maps. There's no real explanation. It just says, hey, it controlled the river system. Oh, I got it. They don't get it. We assume they get it, that they probably don't. And so this helps them visualize it and see the connections, and it's all just layers. So you have choices with the directions I've given you. You can make the map and just say, here, I've got limited time, click on the layers, or you could teach the students a little bit of GIS technology because the lesson is set up to teach you how to take all these layers and then crunch it down into parts. So they basically see every single river in the United States. And how can we shrink it down to just the Mississippi and then just the system? And then how can we grab all the states that intersect the rivers? And that's when students are starting to do GIS work. A little plug for the workforce readiness of GIS, or the workforce value of GIS. It's the second fastest growing industry in the United States, 4th industry of job needs out there. So I like it when I have some students who learn about it and then they're like, I want to do more with this. We also, you'll see with a lot of the pieces at the end, we have a grant that we worked on for a number of years called iSTEM GIS. How do we bring STEM technologies into non-STEM classes? And then how do we bring non-STEM material into STEM classes? And it's about integrating the two together. And GIS is a natural bridge for the STEM and humanities. Let's see, I would now want to show you though, that if you're ready for the classroom, some other technology pieces here. So another video right here, Ann Knowles uses GIS to rewrite history. It's a great one where she talks about how she used it to map out what Robert E. Lee could see at Gettysburg and to really consider his decision-making using modern tools. They recreated the battlefield of 1863 and did some GIS analysis with it. But really, What's interesting is all the software I'm showing you, it's free. 100% free. You can get a site license for your school for 500 users, 1,000 users, or just for you, and you get the full suite. When they did share the technology, many teachers got the technology. And they go, okay, I got this technology. Now what? What can I do with it? And so they enlisted a number of classroom teachers to create a set of 15 to 20-minute activities with ready-made maps and a script to where you can teach students dynamic geohistorical or historical geography topics with dynamic maps. So you'll see under this page a link for the GeoInquiry landing page. And when it brings you to this, it brings you to 10 different collections of activities. The activities range from American literature and science to social sciences, government, human geography, US history, world history, a nice upper elementary collection, world history, and mathematics. I encourage you to explore all these collections because you may find a topic in a human geography collection, say, that will fit your history class. So one that comes up in this collection that I like to use in history classes is the You Claim It, You Name It. And it looks at the place names of places in the Americas. And so I'll go ahead and open this one up just to show it to you. So when you open it up, you first get a one-pager. It's a PDF, 2 pages. Gives you the standards, the learning objectives, and then it gives you a script. And it follows the inquiry process: ask, acquire, explore, analyze, and act. The actions are pretty limited, but again, it's 15 to 20-minute activity. But they do want students to do some type of decision or synthesis at the end. So in this case, in the middle, they show you, here's the map. And when you click on that, it will trip you out to the map. And there are map notes there. So the first thing you can ask students is, does anybody know why we call America, America? And you click on the map note and it says, hey, here you go. Here's some information if the student doesn't know. America was named after Amerigo Vespucci and the German cartographer Martin Wadzimöller, who named America after this Portuguese explorer after he realized this is not the Indies and Asia. Then you're like, to build it up, you're like, okay, well, what about, click on the map note over here on the West Coast. Did you know Ferdinand Magellan named the Pacific Ocean for peaceful ocean in Spanish? And then it says, well, let's look at some settlements. And so it says, let's zoom down. And so say, click on bookmarks and head to Eastern Canada. And the students have to explore and think about what root language do you see on the place names? And they'll say, I see some French. I see a little bit of English, but it seems mostly French. And it says, okay, now click on the bookmark, head out to the American East Coast, click on map content, and turn on settlement 1655. And turn on your legend. Now you ask the kids, what do you notice about the root language of settlements? And they go, oh, I see French predominantly in Eastern Canada and mostly English here. When we see a lot more English names on the East Coast here, although there is a few Dutch names in New York at the time. Then you say, well, let's go to the West Coast of the Americas. And you ask the students, what languages do you see on this map? And they'll notice on the West Coast, they see predominantly Spanish toponyms. Toponymy by the name is just the science of naming places. It's one of my favorite things in historical geography. But Bakersfield, Ridgecrest, and Barstow, those are English toponyms. You're like, well, what's going on there? Why are there English toponyms inland, Spanish toponyms on the West Coast? You go back to content and you turn on the missions and you start to see the names of Spanish missions, and they will tell you when the Spanish mission was established. And you try to make them make connections that if you were to head to the center of many of these communities today, you will see the original Spanish mission in the center of town. But then we click on mining towns and we start to see more English names. So you see the names on the eastern edge of California came from settlers migrating to the west. The toponyms on the west coast were from the Spanish missions. And so now you can start to even bring it into the age of exploration, religious, counter-reformation if you want to. You can bring a lot of different topics in here. And then we go, well, let's go to another part of the Americas and let's head to the West Indies. And at that point, we bring in Christopher Columbus's big error, right? That he thought he was in the Indies and he named this area the West Indies. And to this day, it is still the West Indies if you send a postcard there. And then you look at the Trinidad toponyms. And so you go to the island of Trinidad, which is named after the Holy Trinity. And you ask the students to look at the complexity of the toponyms here. And you can go to the legend and go, what does this tell us about this island? And they quickly pick up on that it switched hands a lot. Yeah, it was a very contested landscape. It was indigenous. You have indigenous names. It was Spanish. It was French. It was English. It was Dutch. And it ended up being an English colony. It's also a nice time to remind the students that there were 26 English colonies, not 13, because there were 13 English colonies in the West Indies and in the Caribbean. And they were very much the prized colonies of the British Empire at the time. So you can start to bring that in. But this is just one of the geo inquiries. If you look at the collection, they are ready to go. Another one that I like to do when we get to religion is sacred space and place. It has the students look at the origin of the sacred sites to the 5 major religions. And it also shows you how close the religious sites are in Israel, particularly in Jerusalem, in Old Town Jerusalem, how they are literally a half a mile from each other. And students see that scale. They don't just read it, they look at it on a map and go, you mean that the distance from here to the school parking lot is where you have sacred sites to 3 different religions? I'm like, yeah. They're like, whoa. That's pretty heavy. You're like, yeah, it is heavy. And it's why it's been a very difficult peace process in that area of the world. So you're bringing hundreds and thousands of years of history to today. If you go back to the Geo Inquiry landing page, go back up here. If you go to US history, you will find topics here too. I've had some teachers say, well, I don't like the questions they asked. That's exactly why they kept it to 2 pages. Teachers don't follow scripts. So it's a 2-page script to help you get started. These are published in Creative Commons. So if you want to change the question, you're not hurting anybody's feelings. Please change the questions. You want to go beyond 15 or 20 minutes with these activities, bring it up for multiple lessons, have at it. After you learn the technology, you want to make a copy of this map and add your own map notes and add your own flavor to it, you can do that too. So you'll see here in US history, everything from the 13 colonies to the war before independence, help students realize the war didn't begin with the Declaration of Independence. It was going on well before that. The Underground Railroad's a very dynamic one. It shows the networks and all the different Underground Railroad stations. World War I, that's a great one for tomorrow. It goes into the war ending on November 11th, 1918. A nice one on Operation Overlord's a great one for D-Day. It's very dynamic. It has students analyze the Normandy invasion and landing. Hotspots, the Cold War is pretty hot. And then the Great Exchange, some people call it the Columbian Exchange. So you'll see these are all here for you, but then you might be like, well, these are set up with scripts. And if I give it to my kids, they already know the answers. Well, we have an answer for that too. If you click on the second link here, here are all of your student worksheets set up in a Google Drive. And so what you do here is you click here and then you go to this drive and you will see folders for different geo inquiry collections. So if you click on the US history folder here, it brings you to, all right, I'm about to teach the Underground Railroad. Click on here. You make a copy of this to your folder. You can edit it. You can change the directions, but it has the directions and then the students can fill out information. So typically when I use this in my classroom, and I use a geo inquiry probably every unit, and the kids really like it. Some kids, sure, they're going to go Google their house, or they're going to go look for their house, and that's what they're going to spend their time. But I'll set a timer for 10 to 15 minutes. Some kids will be done in 10 minutes. Some will still be working through it. And then we go through the high points of the activity. And I bet you total, we spend 30 minutes on it. Yesterday, we were using one in human geography on the first European Industrial Revolution. It's a really solid activity. We used it for just 30 minutes. So while it says it's a 15-minute activity, if you want the students to have a chance to dabble with the maps and then to review it, and it's really important to review it too, because as Sarah was asking, how do you get students to see these concepts? You don't assume they get it. You go back and you review the important concepts you want them to, and the connections you want them to make. So we have a couple more minutes just to show you a few more things in here. There's a collection for Georgia. There's a Virginia GeoInquiry collection. And then there are some story maps. At the very bottom of this list, you'll see also a story map gallery. The Placing Primary Sources collection is a Teaching with Primary Sources project for Library of Congress, in which you get access to some really dynamic story maps that cover benchmark topics throughout history. So when you get to this site, scroll down to the teachers page, and this will give you all the things you need as the teacher. So it will give you a background essay for the topics. Let's say we were doing one on placing US immigration in history. You click on the link, and it brings you to a contextual essay, short one. But then it also gives you student guides and teacher materials, and all of these things are in Word, PDF, or Google Doc, and they are in Creative Commons, and you can edit them. This takes you to some dynamic maps, but also it follows the Library of Congress historical inquiry tools of what do you see, what do you wonder? I think, it's like, what do you see, what do you infer, and what do you wonder about the things that you're seeing there? Finally, back to this slide presentation. I knew I made too much stuff here just to show you. So how do we use this in the classroom beyond these activities? A little over a year ago, Virginia declared that Juneteenth would be a state holiday. Just this past year, the federal government announced that Juneteenth is now a federal holiday. It inspired myself and a professor at North Carolina Central University to say, students don't understand the geography of Juneteenth. They might understand the history, but do they understand the geography? And so in the Virginia Geographic Alliance collection, there is a topic called the Geography of Emancipation. As you go through it, it has students look at what was the geography of emancipation. And here's a map that shows you exempt territories of the Emancipation Proclamation. Just because it was issued didn't mean every part of the Confederacy was impacted by it. And these are areas. And so the whole thing goes through why Juneteenth and why is it significant, and how do other communities around the United States celebrate emancipation? In the state of Ohio, they celebrate September 17th, the day of the first draft of the Emancipation Proclamation. In Virginia, in Hampton Roads area of Virginia, they celebrate January 1st, 1863. Other places, Tennessee celebrates a day in August, because that was the day in which Andrew Johnson emancipated his slaves. So that gets to scale too. There's the national scale, but there's also the local significance of emancipation. In my class, when we get to Age of Exploration, kids use an interactive map to research their favorite recipe and map out the geography of it. And so we do a GeoInquiry, and then they fill out a form that maps out where their ingredients are from. And the very glowing points here show you where the recipe is from. The dots show you where the ingredients are from. They then put all of it together, and they start to create. This is one for a student who mapped out he's from Tanzania, the national dish maharage. So the maharage is from Tanzania, but look at where his ingredients are from. And if I was to draw a historical trade route, I'd say Shazam, that's the Silk Road. And then we can say, all right, well, how's it connected? And we use GIS wizardry to say, show me point to origin, like Delta Airlines maps things. And we can see the connections that his recipe has to the globe. And then they convert it into a story map and present their recipe in the form of a story map. And this is one where a student mapped out his favorite grandmother's French toast here. And then sometimes your students get unique opportunities. I've had students do GIS for national museums. This is a student who took these old historical records here and created a records for the Barbados National Museum of where everybody signed up to help build the Panama Canal. So here's the 21st century digitization here. And then she created these maps for them. They put it into an interactive PowerPoint, and she happened to have family there, and they showed her as a 15-year-old student her product as the centerpiece of their museum for 6 months. It's probably the best case scenario of using this technology, but it does show you where your kids can take this stuff. Very authentic, historical research and presentation. Vietnam War, there are thousands and thousands of bombs that remain there. Students at James Madison University created an app to help communities map out where are these ordinances and how do we remove them safely. And this shows two college students there assisting locals on how to use this technology to better understand and to remove these unexploded ordinances from your community. So my final message is please say yes to GIS when it comes to your classroom. And I know I've gone over just a few minutes, so I thank you for sticking around. And I'll just ask, are there any questions that you have about the technology right now?
One question I would ask, Chris, I think especially maybe for beginning teachers might be useful who maybe aren't as comfortable messing around with this.
Yeah.
What do you think? I'm assuming probably that the links you shared with us are the ones that are the best and easiest for people to be familiar with. But if there were one that you would consider the best way for people who want to try this but are a little hesitant to get started with, what's the one you would recommend that would help us as teachers feel most comfortable?
The geo inquiries.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they just start here because the maps and the steps are provided to you and your student worksheets are there. The best tip for geo inquiries is do test drive it first. Don't go in cold that morning and just wing it because you want to be able to navigate the technology. And also there are technical tips on the back, but this is where I would start. I do, and then yeah, I just start here. This is exactly the first place I'd start.
I figured you were showing us the best one from the beginning.
Yeah.
But I always appreciate that a lot. I was thinking as you were talking that as we increasingly try to both internationalize US history, but then really focus on making our stories of our communities and local history part of national narratives, this can be so useful, as you talked about at the beginning, the idea of scale and regions, and just helping students realize the different ways that they can use the history of their community and really place it in the context of that place and where people are coming from in the past and in the present, as we're such a mobile society and continuing to build communities.
Yeah, we like to call it accordion mapping. You can shrink it down or expand it. So you can show those connections. I would like to highlight in the resources, if you would like to get the technology for your class school, it is not a hard application process. You'll have it in your school within a week. You just click here under the first thing for Esri education site. And it brings you to the schools page. And if you work your way down just a little bit, they brings you to resources, but there should be towards the bottom how to access the schools. Yeah, explore education licensing, and you can request your free site license for your school. And then there are other things here too, different books, different articles, ways to access online courses. There is an online course offered through the National Humanities Center. I am one of the instructors. It's a 5-week course that if you choose to take it, by the end, you're making your own story maps. And the geo inquiry piece is week 1 of the whole course. So what we covered was week 1, but there are many things you can do with this. So again, I thank you for joining us tonight. And are there any questions? Any final questions?
Looks to me like people have taken it in. Would you mind if we provided your contact information?
Do not
so
mind at
that,
all?
I believe it's posted on our website so that if people do have questions to follow up with you, we will be sure to provide that. And then also they will receive again in an email after the webinar a link to the website that you were sharing previously that I was playing along with as you were going through your presentation as well.
I'm always happy to help anyone when they're getting started with this. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for spending this evening with us and helping us better understand how GIS can enhance our teaching in history and in all content areas. And I thank all of our attendees on behalf of the National Council for History Education for spending your Wednesday evening with Chris and with me. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.